Hey party people, in this video we are going to go over sitting figures like these, okay, on chairs, on stools, propping their butts on chests of drawers, etc. And with sitting figures, the biggest difference in terms of what you have to pay attention to between sitting figures and standing figures is really in the lower body. I mean, upper bodies, they're going to be sitting up, straight up, or slouching, or what have you, like you do with standing poses. Sitting poses, you're going to pay attention to the changes in the legs. And the two big things are foreshortening. Okay, foreshortening is when the angle is coming towards you. So these legs are coming towards us, so they're foreshortened. And muscles moving around with legs folded over. So with this, her legs are crossed. And so her gastrocnemius, all of her calf muscles are kind of squished over to one side. When you have a pose like this, she's so like precisely posed that you barely see her calf muscle like squished into her knee there. But that's because her leg really isn't fully crossed on the other leg like this one is. This thigh is resting completely on the other thigh. Okay, really quick, let's go over my materials. I have my visual references. I'm going to use tracing paper today. I don't have a brand preference for tracing paper as long as it is not like too plasticky, vellum-y, but more like paper, more matte. I have my mechanical pencil. I have my two favorite erasers, my Pentel Click for big erasing, my Tombow Mono for detail erasing, and a couple of Pilot Color Enos. These are mechanical colored pencils, and I love these to do corrections work. Clear graph ruler and masking tape, some kind of tape that's not particularly sticky. Doesn't matter because I put lint on it anyway. That way I can peel it up later really easily. I'm going to show you how to do this figure using my 4-step croquis building process. Now, I have a video series on that. Both I have a series for women, a series for men. And if you want to go and watch those, they're very in-depth. They're made for beginners. If you are a beginner and are learning croquis drawing from scratch, I suggest you go watch that series. Okay, I'm going to move a little bit quickly with this particular one. Okay, now I have videos on how to do this for not elongated figures and elongated figures. So at this point, when you have your visual reference, you need to decide, okay, do I want an 8-head figure, 9-head figure, 10-head figure? Okay, let's say I want to do a 10-head figure on this. Right. The first thing you need to do is measure the head. You want to measure along the center of their face. And if you can't tell where the top of her head is because she has some floopy hairstyle, just keep in mind that the center of the eye is the center of the whole head. Not the center of the face, but center of the whole head. So she's at 1/2 and 1/16, so this is a 1 1/8 inch head. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip my paper over. I'm gonna draw my plumb line. I always put the head line, the plumb line, on the back so that when I'm drawing and erasing here, I don't lose my number line. And I'm going to do a 10-head figure today because it's the most difficult. And so I like to demo the harder ones, and then you guys can do the easy ones off of that, or easier. So I'm going to mark her pelvis in here. I'm using just a white pencil so I can see what the hell's going on. There's her pelvis here. There's her center front. And so I'm going to follow this line, and there's her center front, and there's her side. Okay, that's kind of how her side seam would sit if she were wearing pants. That's the base of her neck, kind of the base of her pelvis. I'm going to say that's about where her plumb line is, her center of gravity for the way she's sitting on the chair. plumb line. The 1 mark is right at her chin. Trace the head. There's the center line for her face. There's her ear. So that's mark 2, and the 2 mark is the top of her breast where a strapless dress would sit, and her breasts are kind of like right there. That's one breast, that's the other breast. There's her shoulder balls. Mark the angle of her neck, angle of her shoulders. Okay. And then here's the 3 mark, and you're going to scooch that up to where her waist is. There's her rib cage. There's her side seam. And then when we mark the waist, we mark the elbows. And we always mark with the full width of the joint so you can figure out how wide each joint and limb is going to be. And then with women on a 10 head figure, bottom of the hip is 4 1/4. So we're going to scooch that up to the bottom of her pelvis, line that plumb line back up again. Now we mark the wrists. And yeah, the angle's going to be thrown off a little bit because you're elongating everything. This is the tricky part where we start doing the legs. Now, normally on a standing figure, the center of her knee would be at 6. If that's her thigh, that would be the length of her thigh on a standing figure. So what I would do is I would take the center of that, just about here. The measurement is to here, the center of her knee. That is 2 3/8. This leg has no foreshortening. I will follow the angle of this, 2 3/8. So there's her leg. That's the joint of her knee and everything. Remember, I marked the whole width of it. There's her new wrist placement. And you may be wondering, Zoe, do I have to be that precise? No, after a while, you start doing these and you'll get a feel for it without having to measure things. But I'm giving you the most structured, exact way to get you started. With a 10 head figure, your ankle is at 9. So it's 1, 2, 3 3/8 inches is the center of your ankle. Actually, first, let's do the other knee. So now that we've placed this knee, we're going to place this knee here in proportion. There's the angle of that leg. We have the angle of this leg, 1, 2, 3 3/8. And you're like, holy crap, that is really far. And it's like, well, yeah, it's a 10 head figure. So we're going to put that there. And there's the width of her ankle. There's the angle of her leg. And then we're going to put her foot in here. I'm actually going to make her foot a little bit bigger because the rest of her is so big. You know, she's wearing a bit of a platform, but I'm going to pretend that that's her complete foot. And then here, back to where our knees were. And now our plumb line is off because our legs are so much longer. But make sure that the plumb line is parallel, okay? Don't angle it in weird ways, but make sure things are lined up. 1, 2, 3 3/8. There's the center of her ankle. And there's the pose, elongated to a 10 head stance. Now, if you follow my 4-step croquis building process, then you know step 2 is building out the figure. Step 3 is adding the anatomy. Step 4 is perfecting and modifying to fit my customer. So please go watch those videos if you are interested in really working on your fashion figures. Really quick, I'm just gonna flesh out and correct this figure. I think that her neck is too short and she's like holding her shoulders really high and stiff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise her head. I'm not going to make it bigger. I'm going to raise it and bring it forward a little bit. And I'm going to drop her shoulders a hair, just so she looks a little bit more relaxed. There's her suprasternal notch. There's your Roger. I'm going to drop her breast a tiny bit. Okay, just so she looks a little bit more relaxed, right? Deltoid, her brachio. I'm gonna give her a little bit more butt. You can't really see because she's wearing this dramatic skirt, but it only makes sense that someone's butt gets flattened because they're sitting. Okay, there's that muscle and fat compression thing again. So if she were standing, her butt would be nice and round like that, but because she's sitting, I'm gonna flatten her out. There's her knee. There's the top of her. Give her a little bit of that top of thigh muscle and that hamstring that drops. And then this is going to be flat and flush to the stool that she's sitting on. And then there's her kneecap. Yeah, you're going to see, I like to draw this round piece because it gives me that curve of the calf. And then it reminds me that the front of shins are not straight. I see a lot of, I see cartoonists usually, they do this thing where they curve the calf in this way, but that's a cartoony effect and that can be cute in that style. But in actuality, we do have flesh on the fronts of our shins. So you want to see some of that roundness happening. And you see how the leg tapers so that it's smaller above the ankle. It's narrower above the ankle and then it flares out again. And there's our little peach pit bone. This arm is foreshortened, okay? So if you recall in my drawing clothes 1 video where we talked about wraparounds, if she was wearing a shirt with sleeves, okay, here, this upper arm is not shortened, so it would react normally. But because this arm is so foreshortened, the sleeves, hems, or stripes would be very curved, showing that foreshortening. And then her hand is resting on her knee like so. And then this one, you're gonna see that negative space right there. And you're going to see how this dips. So her crotch is up here and her hamstring dips down. Use this knee ball thing to help you figure out the girth, the beginning girth of your calf. And we're going to fix that squish. We're going to get in there and we're going to squish this in. We're going to move the knee out. And we're going to squish that a little bit. Always address the squishes. That's going to be the new zoism. Address the squishes. Flatten that. And there is your 10 head sitting figure. If you are more comfortable kind of looking at a visual reference and then kind of drawing on your own, you can do that. I'm going to do a 9 head figure for this one, just for variety's sake. So I'm just going to look at this one and then transfer it to my own figure. Okay. Since it does help me give proper fashion figure proportions to have a number line, I'm going to have one here. Something like this. I would mark the center. So here's her face, her head. Center is her eye line. She's looking full frontal. There's no angle here. So I'm going to put her ears in there. There's the center of her head. With the 9 head figure, the proportions are the same as a 10 head figure, except with a slightly shorter, a lot shorter calf. I mean, not a lot of people in the world are 9 heads, but 9 head bodies do exist in nature. And so it looks very fashionable without it looking too exaggerated. You know, there are a lot of supermodels, Giselle, Nadia Auerman, they are literally 9-head figures. The 2, again, is right at the top of the breast, and her torso is real straight. She's not twisting one way or the other. Her shoulders are pretty straight. So we're gonna keep those breasts in there. We're gonna double-headed Mickey Mouse. There's the angle of her shoulders. I do breasts and then shoulders because I know that breasts are gonna sit right under that 2 mark, and then shoulders are gonna sit proportionately above that. With some poses, like this one where she's really pushing her shoulders back and trying to give a very upright posture, you're gonna see a separation in that double-headed Mickey Mouse. Here's that, and here's her shoulder ball. And it's also 3/4, so there's some of that. But a lot of these more frontal views, you are gonna see that double-headed Mickey Mouse look. Waist is at 3, there's her rib cage. 4¼ to 4½ is where the bottom of her pelvis sits. And again, you know, it's gonna be flattened some. It's flatter here because it's squished. This doesn't look flat because her thigh is being raised. So it's not like her fat is sitting on the little, what is it, fence post. Okay. So this part is relaxed. This part is more coming right at you. And generally speaking, your shoulders are the widest part, then your hip, and then your breast. Generally, of course, you can modify for your customer, for your illustration, etc. We're gonna draw the arms last because they're in proportion to her leg. Her breast is like in here, right? And her knee is overlapping her breast a little bit. So I'm going to take my red pencil and I'm gonna mark that up here. That's where her knee is. Kind of straight up and right in front of her breast. Her ankle is, her calf is tucked in. Her ankle is right in front of her crotch, tucked right up against her other thigh and at the bottom of her hip. So there's her ankle. So that's, and then her foot is straight down, very little foreshortening in there like that. In relation, this girl's other knee is right at the toes of her other leg. So overlapping that plumb line a little bit, there's her knee, there's her calf, and that's how you know how much to foreshorten that leg. I still have my number line. Normally on a 9-head figure, the knee, the center of the knee would be at 6, and then the center of the ankle would be at 8. But since right now it's at 5, and I want a 9-head proportion figure, I'm going to move the ankle down to the center of 7. And her leg is coming out at an angle a little bit, so that's why it's out here like that. And then we have this calf, and then her foot hangs with very little foreshortening, like that. And then her arms, so this elbow is sitting on top of her knee, but off to one side a little bit. So we're gonna put that there. And that's the foreshortening, super foreshortened. And then her arm, her wrist is sitting, it's not squishing. You notice she's not, you know, resting her head on her hand. It's just kind of coming up to touch her face a little. So her wrist is out here, and then we're gonna, you know, work on her hand later on. I have a whole video called How to Draw Hands, and that's how that arm is gonna sit. And then this elbow is going to be a little bit lower, okay, a little bit lower, and not touching, the arm is touching the knee, the elbow is not touching the knee. And do you see the center line? The elbow is just on the other side, so we're gonna do that. Okay, use all these markers and proportions to help you. There's her wrist. You see how it's like right there, right in this little bubble? Okay, so her wrist is right there. almost aligned with the outside of her shoulder. Almost, right? So her arm is in there, tucked in there, and then her hand. Seriously, go watch that how to draw hands video where I go over making sure that you draw the back of your hand as opposed to the front of your hand for these kinds of things. So there's that and that. And those are the proportions laid out onto a 9-head fashion illustration figure. Let's flesh out this figure. There's her elbow sticking out. If her shirt had stripes, they would sit like that, super round, because they're coming right at you. You're gonna see all of that knee stuff articulated because the skin is stretched over the knee, and your thigh is going to flatten and curve out, and you're gonna see the calf muscles bulge out. I mean, you can't really see her waist because of her cardigan. I chose this because, like, you can really see her arms. The waist is kind of a matter of your preference, whether how much of an hourglass you want. And then we're going to see this curving down. And then you can see how her ankle gets kind of pushed into the fleshy part of her thigh. And then this kind of rounds out. So anytime you have body parts pressing against each other, you have to acknowledge the flesh getting squished. And then again, there's her kneecap in there. And then this is all kind of smooth because it's hanging without things touching and shoving. And ugh, that's a terrible looking leg. Excuse me. Let's try that again. Ankle's too big. Ah, better. Don't forget to draw that surface. So even later on, if you change the thing, like if you decide to put her on a bar stool or something, this is still the seat that she's sitting on. Okay, I want to do this real quick because you're going to see a lot of sitting figures and with crossing legs. So let's do another example of the muscles and fat squishing over. This is your pelvic box. She's sitting kind of straight at us. Let's say that's the center. And that's where her legs are coming and her knees are crossed. Okay, she's kind of like that. Her knee is up here, and that's the angle of her calf. And then this one, her knee is down here. Her calf is angled like so. The angle is about there. So that's her leg there. I know, it looks really weird right now. So there's her hip. There's her knee. Her kneecap is really high up there. And this is coming forward, and there's her other knee. This, if she were standing and her muscles weren't being moved around, her calves, the muscle would sit further out like this, just a little bit, and then all of this would be much flatter. Because right now it looks so wide because it's squished. Okay? It's not just kind of more cylindrical like it usually is. Push a little bit out like that. There's that divot in here. And that's where her muscle gets pushed out, coming back in. There's the ankle, and there's her foot. I should really draw that more foreshortened. And then this one is not squished. It's just hidden. Okay, it's the one on the bottom, and so you're not going to see muscle squishing. You're just going to see it back here. You're going to see a lot of different pose variations, but the point is to pay attention to your visual reference and pay attention to what is being squished around. This kind of pose, you don't see much foreshortening or muscle compression. You do have to make sure that you kind of layer the calf in front of the thigh. Because if you draw this line, it looks like the thigh is in front of the calf, which doesn't work with the way it's folded and everything. So you got to make sure that you draw this curve in the front. This kind of sitting pose is one of the easier ones. There's no foreshortening, not even in the arms, and there's no muscle compression because this is like almost a 90-degree angle. There's no squishing, nothing. These two things, foreshortening and muscle compression, they don't change for children. They don't change for male to female because, I mean, maybe the guy you're drawing is more muscular. Okay, not all men are more muscular than all women. There's super toned women and men that show zero muscle definition. Okay, so yeah, foreshortening. And in this case, not so much muscle compression. Just hashtag always be practicing. Hashtag practice not magic. Hashtag if your first one sucks, you're right on track. Hashtag it's hard because it's hard, not because there's anything wrong with you. I know, I have a million of these. I'm going to make t-shirts eventually. All right? Drop me all the questions in the comment section below. Share this video with people who love figure drawing, and I'll see you in the next video.